before, most people can correctly identify a psychopath. Not true, not true. Of course, there are inaccurate media portrayals, but, psychopaths don't have horns growing out of their heads. And in fact, psychopaths not only appear normal, they appear impressively normal. Psychopaths tend to have quite a great deal of charisma. They're quite good at manipulating people, flattering people. They make intense eye contact, and they seem to be genuinely quite interested in what you're saying. Furthermore, psychopaths tend to come across as quite impressive because they tend to exaggerate and very often just downright lie about what they've done, right? So actually, it's mentioned in Snakes and Suits. He said, if one of the major things that you can do as an employer to screen out psychopathic applicants is to check their references. Check their references. If they say they worked for 10 years at this corporation, call this corporation. Ask, did this person perform here for 10 years? And how was its performance? Because a psychopath, of course, is going to say, yeah, I was head of this project and this project. If he says he's got a PhD from this college or university, check the records. You have to check your references. Because more often than not, a lot of these records don't actually exist. And of course, because psychopaths have this sort of superficial charm. They're very charming individuals. They come across as extroverted, outspoken, assertive. And of course, they're also very good at emotional mimicry. So as Hart once put it, he's a researcher in the UK, psychopaths are people who, they know the notes, but they can't hear or comprehend the music, right? So this is someone who can go to a funeral and cry, but really doesn't understand why everyone is crying. There's also another study that was done. They found, actually these were college students, the participants. They found that in comparison to someone who's depressed and someone who's schizophrenic, your participant is actually least able to pick out and correctly identify the psychopathic individual. So yeah, food for thought. Myth number 5, psychopathy is caused by childhood abuse. The operative word at this point is caused, okay? Childhood abuse is correlated but not causal. Okay, so remember, correlation does not equal causation. So when something is correlated, it means that they rise together or they decrease together. Childhood abuse is correlated but not causal. This means that yes, while a lot of psychopaths do have histories of childhood abuse, many people who have been abused in childhood don't turn out to be psychopaths. Why this is the case is still quite unknown. However, keep in mind that it is correlation, not a causation. Moreover, there have been quite a lot of research done, particularly in the last 2 decades, that have found a significant genetic factor to psychopathy. For example, the twin studies, they found that if you had an identical twin, even if you were raised in different household, the other twin or both twins would have elevated probability of becoming a psychopath as an adult. Moreover, there's also significant neurobiological factors. A lot of MRI and fMRI studies have found quite consistently, actually, there's a lot of papers on this, that psychopathy has to do with something, dysfunction of the limbic system, particularly the amygdala. The amygdala is the area of your brain that deals with, say, fear, aggression, and emotion. And it's also quite important in terms of the development and utilization of empathy. Recent research has found that maybe psychopaths aren't just jerks, maybe there were some significant genetic factors that were at play. Number 6, psychopaths are completely untreatable. Here's the interesting thing, right? Let's say that you have a disorder and you go and you receive psychotherapy, so talk therapy. So you sit down with your shrink and you guys start talking. Your normal person would go into psychotherapy for a problem and probably come out of it a little bit better than they were. However, interestingly and fascinatingly enough, in psychopaths, a psychopath who undergoes psychotherapy, they actually have increased rates of recidivism, right? So what this means is that going through psychotherapy actually makes them worse psychopaths than they were going into it before. And a lot of researchers speculate that this is because in psychotherapy, the psychopath learns sort of the clinical and the research jargon, right? So they learn they learn how to con a shrink, how to con an ER doctor, how to better con police, how to better appear not psychopathic. So they do argue that this is maybe, a contributor to recidivism. However, some treatments are effective, particularly in children and youth, which is why a lot of effort has been made to identifying sort of childhood precursors to developing psychopathy as an adult, because they find that in children and youth it actually may be more effective than it is obviously in adults, and this goes for any personality disorder in general. However, maybe you can see there's concern about ethical implications for this, right? Because what happens if you take the label psychopath, which has a lot of negative, both legal and sociological connotations to it, and slap it on, this 11-year-old kid? Chances are any hope of him receiving treatment and getting better has now just been destroyed. Because now, if a shrink knows that this kid's a psychopath, they're just going to think, oh, it's completely untreatable, so let's just not try, right? So sort of slapping the label psychopathy on kids has a sort of self-fulfilling prophecy to it, so it is generally not practiced. So the last myth is myth number 7. Psychopaths are generally found NCRMD. NCRMD is legal shorthand for not criminally responsible on account of mental disorder. In a nutshell, this is the insanity defense. This is false. Psychopaths actually are very, very rarely found legally insane. And this not only goes for psychopath, this goes for any legal case in general. This has to do with inaccurate media, sort of biasing your understanding of accurate academic constructs. Anyway, end rant. So you'd be interested to know that statistically speaking, the vast majority of people do not utilize the insanity defense. Actually, the insanity defense is raised quite rarely, and even when it does, it only very rarely succeeds. And one of the major reasons for this is that you can still be found criminally responsible for your crime, even if you have a mental illness. For example, the one example I use is, say, someone who has severe bipolar disorder. So this is someone who goes through extreme depressions and extreme manias. During the period of mania, this person exhibits psychotic symptoms. However, if the prosecutor or the Crown can show that this person was not in their manic phase when they committed the crime, then the insanity defense would fall apart, because this person didn't know what they were doing at the time. Well, let's take a look at the 3 criteria for an insanity defense. Now, I am Canadian, so this is in terms of the Monotone rules, in terms of what constitutes someone who is NCRMD. If you're American, damn you. No, I'm kidding. If you're American, your set of insanity defense is actually quite similar. So the first one is this person has to demonstrate some sort of mental disorder that may or may not, or at least it's plausible that this interfered in their moral judgment. This would not hold for psychopaths because, as I said before, psychopathy, first of all, is not considered it is considered a mental disorder, but the disorder part of it is a research term only. It's not a diagnosis, it is just a research label, making that clear. Moreover, psychopaths are not psychotic, right? And in terms of the insanity defense, psychotic is generally what we're looking at. The second criteria is that the defendant must know the nature and quality of the act. A psychopath understands exactly what he's doing. He understands that it's wrong to steal. He understands that it's wrong to kill. He understands that it's illegal to kill. It's irrelevant to whether or not he thinks it's wrong or not, right? I mean, think about, say, our Western legal system. It does not matter what this person's opinion is on this law. It doesn't matter whether they think it's wrong or right. What matters is that they know that it's legal, and yet they commit the crime anyway. And of course, for psychopaths, they're not psychotic. They know what they're doing. They know that it's illegal, and yet they do it anyway. The third criteria for insanity defense is the ability to distinguish right from wrong. Again, this is legal, right from wrong. A psychopath might just sit there and say, well, murder's not wrong. It's just illegal. So no, false. Psychopaths would not be found NCRMD, and they would be prosecuted for the crime to the fullest extent of the law. Yeah, so those are the 7 most common myths of psychopaths. I hope you learned a lot. If you have any questions, feel free to send me a private message or in the comment section. I will address them. I'm probably going to do maybe a few more videos on psychopathy because there's a lot of research that needs to be sort of fleshed out. So yeah, thanks for watching, and I will see you later.